The wind howled across the steppes like a ghost without rest. It carried dust, bone, and something worse, the echo of a scream that once tore through the skin of a man as his skin was torn from him. He was bound to a wooden stake, naked, his limbs stretched until the joints cracked. Around him, the air shimmered with heat, not from fire but from fear. A blade touched his back, not to kill, but to peel. The crowd didn't speak. They couldn't. For in front of them stood the man who had ordered it, a Mongol emperor whose power was so absolute, so divine, that he didn't just conquer kingdoms. He flayed the will to resist from the flesh of his enemies. This was not Genghis Khan. This was another, one who took cruelty not as a necessity but as an art. And his name was whispered across Asia like a curse. The 13th century was a time of fire and hoofbeats. The Mongol Empire, born from the brilliance and brutality of Genghis Khan, had expanded beyond the imagination of any warlord before him. From Korea to the Caspian Sea, from the cold forests of Siberia to the deserts of Persia, a single banner fluttered, the black standard of the Mongols. They rode faster than fear, struck harder than thunder, and punished deeper than hell. But Genghis was only the beginning. When he died in 1227, his empire was divided among his descendants. And what followed was not peace, but a contest of ambition, loyalty, and cruelty. Some Mongol rulers governed wisely, others with fire, but one man took the terror of war and turned it inward into something personal, something ritualistic, something designed not just to kill but to unmake a man, piece by piece. He was not satisfied with conquest. He wanted obedience, total, trembling obedience. And for those who defied him, death wasn't enough. They had to suffer. Historians still debate the identity of the cruelest Mongol emperor, but many fingers point toward one figure, Berk Khan of the Golden Horde, or even more feared, Tamerlane, the self-declared heir of Genghis Khan, who rose in the late 14th century. Tamerlane, known also as Timur the Lame, was not a true Mongol by blood, but he wielded the Mongol legacy like a scimitar. He claimed divine purpose. He bathed cities in blood, and in his courts, flaying was not uncommon. It was expected, documented. Chroniclers in Damascus, Baghdad, and Samarkand all wrote of skinning. Generals who defied Timur flayed and nailed to city gates, captured spies, stripped alive, and left hanging as wind chimes of human pain. To understand why, we must understand Mongol justice and how it twisted in Timur's hands into something unspeakable. The Mongols believed in order through fear. Their legal code, the Yasa, was brutal but precise. Theft, death. Betrayal, death. Disobedience, death. But Timur, like a sculptor of dread, added his own chapter. He didn't just kill traitors, he erased them. Not merely from history, but from their own bodies. He turned executions into performances. Skinning alive wasn't new. Persians had done it, Assyrians too, but Timur elevated it to imperial theater. In one campaign in Persia, he allegedly ordered the skins of 200 city defenders to be nailed to the walls as a message. In another, he had a rebellious noble skinned and stuffed with straw, then sat the body on the throne the man had dared claim. This wasn't random cruelty, it was psychological warfare. A message: opposition will not end with your death. It will echo in your agony. But why skinning? Why not simply behead, impale, or burn as others did? Because flaying is intimate, it's slow, it's deliberate, it requires that the victim remain alive for as long as possible. It makes the executioner an artist and the condemned the canvas. The Mongols believed that rebellion had to be punished in such a way that no one else would dare it again. Skinning someone alive, publicly, turned that person into a living symbol of what happened to those who said no. It also had spiritual consequences. Many Central Asian belief systems, including Mongol shamanism, saw the skin as part of the soul. To die skinless was to wander the afterlife without form. So, to flay someone was to curse them, not only in life, but in death. Timur understood that, and he used it. The stage was often a marketplace, a city gate, or a temple square. Witnesses were summoned, not by invitation, by force. Men, women, children, all made to watch. The condemned would be tied upright, naked, oiled. The blade, often a short, curved knife, was preheated. The executioner, trained to keep the victim alive, would start with the back. Long, slow slices. Skin removed in sheets, not scraps. Fingers next, then thighs, the chest last, so the victim could watch his own unmaking. Sometimes they lived for an hour, sometimes longer, and as the final breath left their body, their skin still warm would be lifted like a banner, sometimes displayed, sometimes sewn into scrolls of warning, other times nailed to a city gate, fluttering in the same wind that once carried the rider's trumpet. This was not punishment, this was spectacle. Timur was not alone. His generals followed suit. In the siege of Isfahan, when the city rebelled after surrender, he ordered the death of 70,000. But the leaders, they were skinned, their bodies left on display. In Aleppo, Damascus, and Delhi, the story repeated: skin and fire, blade and scream. Yet Timur considered himself a patron of art, science, and religion. He built gardens in Samarkand, sponsored poetry, prayed 5 times a day. This was the contradiction of Mongol tyranny: beauty built on bones, temples raised by hands still bleeding, cities paved with crushed skulls and stitched skins. A man could build a library by day and order flayings by night, and the people remembered. Stories spread faster than armies, and when Timur's banners approached a city, many surrendered without a fight, not because they feared death, but because they feared what came before it. The scream, the knife, the slow parting of flesh from soul. Even today, in villages from Iran to Uzbekistan, elders speak of a time when the wind blew red, a time when men died screaming not for mercy, but for it to end. This is the empire we're entering, not the golden horde of Genghis, not the trade routes of Kublai Khan, but the skin-stained throne of Timur, where power was proven not through laws, but through the artistry of suffering. In the next part, we travel deeper into the heart of Timur's court, a place where betrayal brewed in golden halls, and the emperor sharpened more than just his sword. The betrayal was coming, and the punishment was already prepared. Power in the Mongol world was not inherited. It was taken, seized by blade, held by fear, and proved in blood. By the late 14th century, Timur, better known in the West as Tamerlane, had done what no one thought possible. He revived the Mongol legacy and eclipsed it in terror. From a tribal noble with a limp to a sovereign who claimed divine rule, he rose through betrayal, manipulation, and war. But Timur's greatest battles weren't fought on distant battlefields. They brewed inside his own palace, in the whispers of generals, the ambitions of governors, and the trembling hands of those too close to his iron throne. The punishment for betrayal was not exile. It was not imprisonment. It was pain profound, public, and designed to outlive the traitor. Because in Timur's court, treachery wasn't a crime. It was a ritual sacrifice. Timur's capital was Samarkand, a city of beauty built on the bones of the conquered. There, he summoned artisans from Damascus, architects from Delhi, and scholars from Persia. He constructed mosques with turquoise domes, towers with gold-tipped spires. But beneath the polished surface, his rule ran on paranoia. Every smile was suspicious, every gesture a potential dagger. The court was a mirror of Timur himself, elegant on the outside, murderous within. His closest generals were men he had fought beside for decades. Yet, in this empire, loyalty was currency, and one misspoken word could bankrupt you. One such man was Emir Zafar, a commander from the western frontier, once Timur's most trusted advisor. Known for his discipline and battlefield genius, Zafar had quelled rebellions in Persia and helped secure the northern trade routes. Timur praised him in public, gifted him estates, even considered him for succession. But power breeds whispers, and whispers in Timur's court were as dangerous as swords. In 1396, during a campaign toward Anatolia, Zafar was accused of conspiring with Turkic rebels. No evidence, no trial, just rumors carried by rivals hungry for favor. Timur, already worn from years of warfare and increasingly superstitious, believed it, and belief was all it took. The sentence was decided before Zafar ever knew he had been accused. Timur invited him to a royal banquet. The halls were lit with oil lamps. Musicians played Persian string melodies. Dancers moved like shadows. Zafar entered smiling, unaware that by morning his body would be a message and his skin a flag. The story of Zafar's fall is infamous. At the height of the banquet, Timur raised a cup of wine and proposed a toast to loyalty. Zafar stood, bowed, drank, and then chains. From behind the columns, guards appeared, not soldiers, executioners. Their uniforms were black, their faces veiled. No one spoke, not even Zafar. Timur, seated on his cushioned throne, simply nodded once. Zafar was dragged from the banquet hall into the courtyard, still in his robes, still drunk from celebration. The music kept playing. The punishment was to begin immediately. He was tied between two pillars under moonlight. Witnesses were summoned: nobles, generals, foreign guests. Some thought it was a theatrical warning. Others knew better. Timur had ordered the five-fold flaying, a rare punishment reserved for traitors of the highest rank. It began with the removal of the palms, fingers stripped one by one, skin peeled back from knuckles like bark from a tree. Zafar remained conscious, gritting through a wooden bit, his eyes locked on Timur, who watched from a shaded platform, silent and unmoved. Then came the arms, cut from wrist to shoulder in spirals. The executioners worked with the calm precision of men cleaning a painting, not torturing a friend. The back was next, the widest canvas. Strips of skin pulled with metal hooks, torn slowly to avoid fatal bleeding. Zafar screamed for the first time here. It echoed into the gardens and returned unanswered. Witnesses later described the scene as ritualistic, like a purification by pain. Timur sat motionless, fingers steepled. Some said he whispered prayers, others claimed he was calculating. When the face was reached, the crowd turned away. The skin was not peeled entirely, just enough to deform, enough to erase the identity that once commanded armies. Zafar was still alive. The final act, the heart covering. His chest was flayed just over the ribs, skin removed in a circular motion around the heart, leaving it beating beneath exposed flesh. It was not meant to kill. It was meant to mark him. Timur approached only once. He looked down at the ruin of the man who once had his trust and said, "You will be remembered," then turned his back. Zafar's fate was not yet complete. He was kept alive, fed through a tube, wrapped in linen to prevent infection. His skin was stitched into a tapestry, a patchwork added to a private chamber wall where Timur reportedly kept the hides of other traitors, a silent gallery of disloyalty. Zafar's broken body was displayed on a cart and pulled through Samarkand's streets. A sign was tied to his chest. "This is the reward of false loyalty." His eyes never closed. After 3 days, he was finally executed, not with a sword, but by slow burial, alive. The earth swallowed him inch by inch. But this was not the only case. Timur's use of flaying spread through his administration like wildfire. Governors flayed dissenters in public squares. Spies were caught and skinned in desert forts. Timur's own sons and grandsons began adopting similar practices, not always by his order, but by his example. The empire became a machine of fear, and fear worked. Rebellion ceased, tribes submitted, cities opened their gates before Timur even arrived. Not because they believed in his cause, because they feared becoming art. Yet inside the palace, paranoia only grew. Timur trusted no one. Generals began leaving the court. Advisors kept their conversations to whispers. Even his own scribes avoided eye contact. He was building a kingdom of ghosts, and the ghosts were still alive. In 1402, during his campaign against the Ottomans, Timur reached the height of his power. He defeated Bayezid I, the Sultan of the Turks, and locked him in a cage like an animal. But even then, Timur was restless, unsettled. His enemies were falling, yes, but loyalty, that was a riddle he could never solve. So long as people could think, they could betray. So he kept the blade sharp and the executioners close. In the next part, we descend further into Timur's warpath, a rebellion rising in the west, a city that dares to defy, and the horrific price it pays. The victims have been chosen. The platform is built, and the wind begins to stir once more. The flaying, is about to begin. There are cities that fall by siege and others that fall by fear alone. And then there are cities like Shivas that fall, but don't die until the skin of their people has fed the sand. By the early 1400s, Timur was no longer a rising force. He was a storm that had swallowed kingdoms. Persia lay at his feet. The Delhi Sultanate had been broken. The Golden Horde was in retreat. But there remained a flicker of defiance in Anatolia, in the heart of modern-day Turkian alliance of Turkish beyliks and their protector, the Sultan Bayezid I of the Ottoman Empire. Shivas, a fortified city at the foot of the Anatolian mountains, dared to resist. It stood between Timur and full control of the Silk Road's western gate. Its walls were strong, its people proud, and its leaders trusted in their alliances. But they didn't know Timur, not really. They hadn't seen what happened to Isfahan, or Aleppo, or Baghdad. They hadn't smelled the iron tang of open flesh on stone. They hadn't heard the screams of those being flayed alive to make a point. They would. The siege of Sivas began like many others in Timur's campaigns, sudden, overwhelming, surgical. His engineers erected siege towers within a week. Sappers tunneled beneath the foundations. Catapults hurled stones the size of horses. Still, Sivas held out for 10 agonizing days. On the 11th day, a proposal came from Timur's camp. Surrender. Your lives will be spared, your city untouched. The defenders hesitated. The Sultan's reinforcements were far away. Supplies were dwindling. Some wanted to resist to the bitter end, but others, remembering the tales of Timur's wrath-urged caution, eventually the gates were opened. Timur entered not as a conqueror, but as a guest. Draped in silk, surrounded by standard-bearers, he rode through the city without a word. His soldiers did not loot. His guards did not kill. Instead, they documented. They mapped the city, catalogued the nobles, made lists, and when night fell, the real purpose of the surrender was revealed. The next morning, the executions began. Not of soldiers, not of rebels, but of the commanders, those who had dared to defend the city at all. Timur, standing before them in the central square, proclaimed, "You broke no oath, but you delayed my justice. That I cannot forgive." He ordered each officer stripped naked, their weapons shattered, and their names recorded. One of them a commander named Farid al-Dinspat in Timur's direction. For a moment, the crowd froze. Then Timur smiled. "Begin with him." What followed was the most methodical, calculated act of cruelty the city would ever know. The preparation for the flaying began at dawn. In the center of the main square, a wooden scaffold was erected, not high but broad-wide enough for 5 men at a time. Executioners sharpened their curved blades on wet stones, tested them on strips of animal hide, then rubbed the steel with oil to prevent premature death. Farid al-Din and the other commanders were chained to upright posts. No blindfolds. Timur wanted them to see, to feel every movement, to understand what it meant to delay a god, emperor's march. The flaying began with the soles of the feet. Soft, tender flesh, easy to cut, impossible to numb. The victims screamed almost instantly, but the executioners didn't rush. Their task was not just to kill it, was to display, to take hours, to show the people of Sivas that mercy was a word with 2 meanings. Timur sat under a white canopy, sipping wine, watching. The method was systematic. After the feet came the thighs and calves, peeled in long spirals that revealed purple muscle and white tendons beneath. Red paint could never capture it. This was living color. Blood that pulsed, that cried, that refused to die quickly. The back was next, a canvas of exposed ribs and carved spines. Then the face, carefully, surgically unwrapped, so that the victim's expression froze in a permanent rictus of horror. Some died from shock. Others held on for hours. Timur made note of them. He liked the strong ones. They were remembered, but their skins were remembered more. Each man's flayed skin was treated, rubbed with ash and vinegar, then stretched over wooden frames. Once dry, they were displayed at the city gates, not like corpses, but like flags. Each bore a name, written in black ink across the chest. This was Farid al-Din, a delayed Timur. This is justice. The people were made to walk past them each day. Children cried. Mothers averted their eyes, men bowed their heads, and above all of them, the skins fluttered in the Anatolian wind like sails from hell. But this was not the end of Sivas's punishment. Timur ordered that the rest of the garrison, some 3,000 soldiers, be buried alive. A trench was dug just outside the city walls. The prisoners were herded into it in groups of 100. No weapons, no bindings. They were told to lie face down. Then, dirt. Shovels moved like clockwork. The earth grew heavier by the minute. Some screamed, others prayed, a few sang. By nightfall, the trench was flat. Timur planted a flag at the site, a blood-red banner with a skin tied beneath it. Let this ground remember. Let their bones hold the line. The psychological effect was total. Sivas became a ghost city. People whispered but did not speak. Children played no games. The wind carried no music. And beyond its walls, other cities heard the tale of flaying, of burial, of justice in Timur's tongue. In the following months, 4 more cities surrendered without resistance. Their walls were lowered, their gates opened, their leaders presented gifts before Timur even arrived. They did not do this out of loyalty. They did it out of fear, because they had seen the banners of skin, and they knew he was coming. Back in Samarkand, Timur's scribes immortalized Sivas in ink and gold. They wrote of the emperor's mercy, his divine right to punish, his justice that preserved order. But others told the real stories. Survivors, merchants, foreign envoys. They spoke of skinning alive, of men buried like animals, of cruelty so refined it became policy. And so, the legend grew. Timur's name became a spell, a warning, a thundercloud over all of Asia. He wasn't just a man, he was punishment made flesh. In the next part, we will witness the full horror of a single execution, not from afar, but moment by moment. We will enter the scaffold, hear the blades, smell the burning flesh, and feel the silence of a crowd forced to watch as a man is flayed alive for defiance. This is not history. This is ritual violence, and it's only just beginning. The execution scaffold stood like a forgotten altar beneath the bruised sky of Samarkand. No banners fluttered, no music played. The city held its breath. The condemned was already tied in place upright, arms stretched above his head, legs secured with iron bands, naked, filthy, bruised. His chest heaved with panic as the sound of approaching boots echoed across the courtyard stone. This was no ordinary criminal. He was once a provincial governor, proud, defiant, and foolish enough to conspire against Timur's authority, caught by his own servant, delivered in chains. He had begged for a quick death. Instead, Timur decreed a public flaying, not to punish one man, but to remind 10,000. From the moment Timur entered the courtyard, the crowd fell to its knees. No trumpet sounded. He needed none. The mere sight of him wrapped in silver-threaded robes, eyes black as coal, lips tight with judgment was enough. He sat beneath a silk canopy beside the scaffold. His gaze didn't wander. His hands were still. The executioner stepped forward, silent, hooded. In his hand, a knife with a curved, sloping edge, sharpened to a glinting whisper. It had no ornament. It didn't need one. Its purpose was pure. A low drum began. Just one beat every few seconds, like a heartbeat or a countdown. Then the blade met flesh. Phase 1, the opening cut. The knife entered just below the nape of the neck, where the skin is soft and layered. A shallow incision no more than a finger's depth. A gasp from the victim. Then a scream. But the executioner didn't flinch. He dragged the blade slowly down the spine, straight and clean, to the small of the back. The crowd flinched. Some covered their children's eyes. Others watched with unblinking dread. The skin was pulled back, not ripped, but peeled, inch by inch, like parchment from a scroll. Blood poured, but controlled. The executioner had studied anatomy. He knew where to cut to avoid death. The governor begged now, pleaded, promised gold, swore allegiance, but it was not his words Timur wanted. It was his silence forced through agony. Phase 2, the shoulders and arms. Leather hooks were used to lift the skin as it loosened. The flayed back glistened in the afternoon sun, a landscape of red, pink, and pulsing violet. The executioner moved to the arms. He sliced along the biceps and twisted gently, unraveling the skin in long ribbons. The crowd moaned as one when the left arm's skin slipped free and dangled from the wrist, still attached. The man shrieked, high-pitched, animalistic, not a scream of fear, a scream of betrayal by his own body. The air thickened. You could smell it now, the iron-rich stench of blood mixed with sweat, old leather, and the smoke from incense burned by the priests to purify the spirit. But there was nothing pure here, only pain made visible. Phase 3. The chest and face. The executioner paused only once to dip his blade in vinegar and wipe it clean. The vinegar hissed on the metal. The governor sobbed in anticipation. The chest was next. The blade danced between the ribs, lifting the skin with curved sweeps. The crowd gasped as muscle fibers pulsed beneath the open wound. The executioner worked in silence. This was not sadism. This was precision. Every cut served a function, to prolong, not to kill. Then came the face. The crowd shifted. Even the guards looked away. The knife entered below the chin and sliced around the jawline. Blood ran into the man's eyes. He screamed, but it came out in wet, gurgled coughs. The lips were peeled from the gums, exposing teeth in a grotesque grin. When the eyes were reached, the executioner stopped. Timur had ordered they be left intact. He must witness every second, Timur had said. Phase 4. The legs. By now, the governor could barely move. His body trembled, not with struggle, but with the body's desperate attempt to stay alive. His skin hung from him like tattered silk. The knife entered the thighs. Long, slow strips. The calves were next. Finally, the soles of the feet last to be touched, first to have screamed. The executioner stepped back. The man still lived. At this point, a priest stepped forward and read aloud the charges. A formality. No one listened. Then Timur stood. He approached slowly, hands behind his back, eyes fixed on what had once been a rival. The governor somehow looked back, his eyes bloodshot, bulging, locked with Timur's. He tried to speak. His lips no longer functioned. Timur leaned in and whispered something no one could hear. Then he turned away. He didn't need to order the final blow. The executioner understood. With a quick twist of the blade, the throat was opened, and the man who had once ruled a province died unmade. The aftermath. His skin was removed completely, washed in salt, and stretched on a wooden frame. It was dried, dyed red with saffron, and stitched at the edges. On it, a scribe painted the words, "I defeated Timur. This is what remains of me." It was hung above the city gate for all to see. The crowd dispersed slowly. No one spoke. The silence was heavier than screams. In the following weeks, reports of unrest in the provinces ceased. Ambassadors from distant lands arrived, bearing gifts and apologies. Governors swore oaths not out of duty but out of terror. The message was heard. Defiance would not be crushed. It would be skinned. But even for Timur, the years were catching up. His body, once agile, now ached. His limp grew worse, his visions more violent. Some whispered that the ghosts of the flayed came to him in dreams, that he awoke screaming, that his tent reeked of blood, even when no one had died that day. He called for more priests, more sacrifices. He ordered more executions. He built gardens where fountains flowed, not with water, but with wine, and somewhere, beneath those vines, lay bones without skin. He could never have enough silence, because the screams never stopped echoing in his ears. In the final part of our story, we follow Timur's final campaign, his death, and the terrible legacy he left behind. His empire would crumble, his tomb would be cursed, but his methods would be remembered. Because once you teach the world that skin is not sacred, there's no going back. It began with terror. It ended with silence. In the winter of 1405, as Timur's army marched eastward to wage one last war, this time against Ming China, the old emperor fell ill. The cold winds of the Kazakh steppe clawed through his bones. The fever came quickly, the visions followed. In his tent, wrapped in fur and furs again, Timur shivered. His body shook, his mind wandered, and some say, in those final days, he called out the names of those he had flayed. Not his children, not his heirs, but the skinless. Timur died in February. His death was not glorious. No final charge, no battlefield farewell. Just a man alone in a frozen tent, surrounded by servants too afraid to speak. He was 68 years old. His death was kept secret for days. His generals feared rebellion, collapse, chaos. The man who had ruled by fear had made his empire depend on that fear. Without him, it began to unravel. But before the empire crumbled, his body was returned to Samarkand. There, beneath a blue dome in a mausoleum called Gure-Amir, they laid him in a tomb carved from black jade. Over his body, the inscription read, "If I rise from the grave, the world shall tremble." And perhaps it did. Timur's empire did not survive him. His sons and grandsons fought over scraps, cities rebelled, trade routes shifted. The unity he had forged through war shattered in peace. But what did survive, what took root in the soil of history, was his reputation. He was remembered not just as a conqueror, but as a master of fear, a man who saw torture not as cruelty, but as strategy, a leader who weaponized suffering with mathematical precision. He didn't just kill enemies, he made examples of them. And that legacy spread. In the decades after his death, stories of Timur's flayings became legend. Merchants told tales of cities where human skins were nailed to gates. Priests whispered of scrolls written on the tanned flesh of rebels. Soldiers claimed Timur could smell disloyalty and that he kept a chamber full of preserved skins, each one marked with its owner's name and crime. Most of these were exaggerations, but not all. Modern historians, studying court records and traveler accounts, have confirmed dozens of incidents where flaying was not just punishment, it was performance. Entire cities made to watch a man's skin removed inch by inch until rebellion itself became unthinkable. To Timur, pain was propaganda, and skin was the perfect canvas. But even after death, Timur's cruelty clung to him. In 1941, Soviet archaeologists opened his tomb against the warnings of local elders who insisted the grave was cursed. Within 24 hours, Nazi Germany invaded the Soviet Union. Over 20 million would die in the conflict that followed. It became known as the Great Patriotic War, the bloodiest chapter in Russian history. Only after Timur's remains were reburied, with full Islamic rites, did the tide of the war begin to turn. Coincidence? Superstition? Or had the skinless dead stirred once more? Today, Timur is remembered differently in different lands. In Uzbekistan, he is a national hero, the father of an empire, a patron of the arts, a visionary. His statue stands tall in Tashkent, casting a long shadow across the square. But in Iran, India, and parts of the Middle East, he is remembered as a butcher, a tyrant, a man who left cities in ruins and riverbeds clogged with corpses. And among those who study the history of torture, Timur remains a symbol of something far darker. The moment when cruelty became law, when flaying became policy, when fear replaced governance. The psychological impact of Timur's punishments reshaped the regions he touched. Even long after his empire died, rulers copied his methods. The Safavids of Persia, the Ottomans, even certain Mughal emperors, descendants of Timur himself, adopted ceremonial torture as political theater. And the lesson they learned? A man who dies quickly may become a martyr, but a man who dies slowly becomes a warning. What is it about skin that terrifies us? Perhaps it's because it's the border between the self and the world, the limit of our identity, the first defense, the last barrier. To lose it is not just to die, it is to lose personhood, to become something else. A relic, a caution. Timur understood that. When he ordered a rebel flayed, he wasn't just killing him. He was sending a message to every soul within 1,000 miles. I own you, not just your body, your memory. Centuries later, in medieval Europe, in Qing China, in colonial empires, rulers would do the same. Not always skinning, but always spectacle, always public, always slow. The shadow of Timur loomed far longer than his empire, and his knives, though long buried, kept cutting through history. But here's the question history dares to ask and never answers. Did it work? Did Timur's flayings truly stop rebellion? Did they preserve order? Or did they plant a deeper seed of rage, of revenge, of generational trauma passed in whispers? We may never know, because those who could answer were silenced. So next time you see the ruins of Samarkand, the brilliant blue domes and elegant minarets, remember this. They were built by the hands of men who feared skinning more than death, by masons who carved marble while praying their name never reached Timur's lips, by scribes who wrote poems on parchment while knowing others had their skin used the same way. And above it all, the black jade tomb still waits, heavy, sealed, watching. If you thought this was dark, join us next time as we explore the rise of Ivan the Terrible and how he created a secret police that tortured thousands with fire and ice, all in the name of divine justice. Subscribe for more stories from history's darkest chambers, where power ruled with pain and silence was survival.